Hey, what's going on, peoples? It's been a minute. Hey, I wanted to talk about something near and dear to my heart, and that's has to do with the Holocaust, the destruction of 6 million Jews, European Jews during the Second World War. I know that was a long time ago to a lot of you people, but still very relevant today, and it's a subject that comes up in conversation all the time. Back in 2015. The then President Barack Obama gave $12 million to Holocaust survivors, and I'm not sure, the specifics about who received that money. I know that we do have quite a few Holocaust survivors alive today here in America. At 2015, there were even more because we all know these are people, if they are alive, are in the minimum 80s. The maximum, could be anything. They're dying every day. And we as American Jews, particularly, have to do everything we can to try to keep their memories alive. Most importantly, the memory of the 6 million that passed away. But having said that, the reason for the video is something a little bit different. I've seen a lot of commentary regarding uh, the Holocaust and the money that the U.S. government gave to these survivors, which really isn't a lot of money, $12 million spread over, I don't know, maybe 20, 30,000 survivors. I'm only guessing how many there exist in America. It's really not that much. But some have said, well, they're giving money to Holocaust survivors when the Holocaust didn't even happen in the United States. The U.S. government didn't perpetrate the Holocaust against the Jews. And I can understand that argument. However, I want to expound upon some knowledge that I recently gained, and it was pretty shocking information. There was a movie that came out in the 1980s called Showa. We all, lots of people have seen it. It was a documentary movie by Cloud Lounsman about the Holocaust. It didn't use newsreels. It was interviews at the time with people that survived, even some ex-Nazis, or maybe they were still Nazis deep down inside. A lot of civilians, Polish civilians, local peasants, talking about different occurrences, particularly Treblinka, Auschwitz, and events in the ghetto. But they have on a website, which is the United States Holocaust Museum's website, a whole bunch of outtakes from this movie. The movie itself was about 8 hours long, but these outtakes are additional several hours, and there's quite a few interviews there of folks that weren't on the original movie. One guy was a United States bureaucrat. He worked in the Roosevelt administration. He was a high up. I can't remember exactly what his title was. I know his name was John Hill, HLE, and he was interviewed by Mr. Lounsman back in the 70s, maybe early 80s. He was quite old at the time, but very lucid, and he was talking about the knowledge that the U.S. government had about what was going on in Nazi Germany. Now we know that people escaped different concentration camps. They've escaped different ghettos, and they were able to express and explain the mass murders that were taking place at Treblinka, at Auschwitz, they're in the ghettos, the mass shootings. We know that to be true. One individual who's also interviewed on Mr. Lounsman's movie show was a gentleman by the name of Rudolf Verba, VRBA, I believe his name is. He actually escaped Auschwitz with another fellow, wrote a book, uh, after the war called Surviving Auschwitz. But at the time of his escape, he expressed his, he was able to express what was going on in Auschwitz. He was part and part. He was a witness to everything that was happening with the gas chambers, how they were taking innocent folks to their deaths coming off of ships. And he expressed this to the Jewish community back in Czechoslovakia, where he escaped to, Prague area, and he has expressed it as well to bureaucrats that were able to bring this message to the Allies, the British, the Americans, and he let it be known what was going on. There was also felt people that escaped Treblinka, and they and Sobibor, another concentration camp. So they knew, the United States government knew exactly what was happening in the war. Okay, that's number one point that I think has been made uh, by multiple sources. Secondly, this gentleman, Mr. Pell, who again, not a Jew from what I understand, and just a person that was in the Roosevelt administration, a high up bureaucrat, also confirmed that. And not only did he confirm that, we do know that during this time, the United States had a quota system with these different European nations, for example, Poland, Russia, um, France, Hungary, and the quota system work that they would allow XYZ amount of immigrants to from each country to immigrate a year into the United States. Now, this could be any immigrant. It could be a Jew, it could be a Christian, it could be whomever. During this time, however, most likely you would think that they would allow Jews to immigrate because knowing that their precarious predicament, that they would probably be murdered by the Nazis, you would think that, hey, if you don't want to use the military to help the situation, for example, Mr. Verba and many others suggested to bomb Auschwitz, even though, yes, it would probably result in murders of some of the inmates, bomb the rail lines. And mind you, there was one bombing that occurred at Auschwitz. However, most believe that it was a mistaken bombing, meaning their real target was some factories, not the concentration camp. It did destroy a barrack and a couple of barracks, and the prisoners were elated when they saw the bombings coming. They wanted it to continue, and they wanted the whole camp destroyed, even if it cost them their life, because they were most of them were doomed anyway, via starvation or selections. There's all kind of ways you could die in Auschwitz. It's amazing anyone made it out. Of course, there was the death marches after Auschwitz, well, after the Russians moved closer to Poland, they marched everyone out of there, and most died on the walk. Very famous events, the death marches. Now, these quotas that the U.S. government had with for immigration from these different nations, Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, were not being met during the time of the Second World War. And this gentleman, Mr. Pell, estimates there were about 500,000 people that were not 500,000 people that could have been allowed immigration into the United States who were not allowed to immigrate into the United States because the quotas were not being filled. Now, why weren't the quotas being filled? It's a very interesting argument or interesting point of discussion. I don't know that, and we'd have to research that more. I know that he alluded to the fact that the government did not want to allow Jews to immigrate because they thought that they would become dependent on the system and not be able to support themselves. However, Mr. Pill makes the argument that the Jewish agencies of America guaranteed that if they would allow immigration, that they would not become a burden to the system, and Jewish agencies would take care of them even if they were not able to find work or find a way to support themselves. But during the war, we all know that there was lots of work. It's not like today where you needed to have a working knowledge of English. You could do physical work. The economy was good at the time. It had recovered from the depression because of the war. The war really gave jobs to people. So we know that couldn't be the case. Uh, and being that the Jewish agencies were guaranteeing that they would not become wards of the system, dependent on the system. For example, with welfare or some sort of charity, we're going to provide the charity if need be. So you have 500,000 individuals, most of whom should have been Jews, who should have been allowed to immigrate into the United States before things got too bad. However, this was not made available to them, and the quotas were left unfilled. Okay, so these 500,000 people, you'd have to imagine that the overwhelming majority of them in the 80 or 90 percentile probably perished in different ways in the Holocaust, either in concentration camps, through starvation in the ghettos, through mass shootings. We all know lots of the things that have happened, or if you don't know, you should research that. Um, and this is you could make the argument that the United States was responsible for probably upwards of 500,000 deaths just on that alone. Because if they would have just allowed, let's say, the German Jews to immigrate, the Polish Jews prior to 1939, when we know September 1st, 1939, the Nazis invaded Poland, um, the Czech Jews, the Hungarians, if they would have all met their quotas, we're talking about 400,000 to 500,000 people would have probably been saved, and that was significant. And the fact that the U.S. government didn't act, the fact that the U.S. government didn't do anything at all to help these people, you'd have to say that that is extreme negligence on their part. And this $12 million that Obama allocated to these people really is a drop in the bucket when you really consider the amount of human lives. Because if those people, and a large majority of them were probably younger, they could have had families, they could have grown communities, they could have been prosperous American citizens, creating businesses, creating opportunities for others. This was a real tragedy, and it's something that's not known about. And again, if you want to find the interview, it's John Pale. It's on the United States Holocaust Museum. His name is spelled Pehle. I'll try to pin it in the comment section in time. I'm not very good at. I don't know how to do that yet, but I will try. And having said that, please be understanding that yes, the Americans themselves were not responsible for the Holocaust, but their lack of action did cause um, a lot of problems and harmed people. The fact that the government did not want to act, and I'm not only talking about the Americans, I'm talking about the British and the other allies. You know, even the Russians, you can make the argument they didn't do anything either. So um, that's what I wanted to express, and I know that the conversation recently has been about reparations to Black Americans, which I'm in favor of. I believe that Black Americans deserve reparations. Certainly, if Native Americans have received some, I'm not going to call this $12 million reparations for the Jewish community. It's that's really not even a drop in the bucket of what would have what would have been adequate amount of money for 400,000 to 500,000 of people dying because of the U.S. lack of action. And you'd have to make the argument that the reason that they didn't want these folks saved was because they were Jews. You'd have to assume that somewhere that was part of the narrative or part of the decision making process. So yes, the U.S. government didn't line up the people, shoot them. The U.S. government didn't put them into gas chambers, but the U.S. government failed to act. They were negligent. They had the ability to act. They had within the laws the ability to save just those folks that were allowed entry due to the quota system. They could have been saved, and they weren't. This lack of action is despicable, and we all know there were other events as well. I can detail those in another video, but I just wanted to express this. I hope everyone has a happy 4th of July, lots of barbecuing and lots of social distancing, and I'll put this in the wind later.